We're going to go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Hope von Borkenhagen, and I'm the Chief People Officer here at Howard Hughes Corporation. But before we get started, I want to give a couple quick announcements. First, I'd like to thank Fairygodboss for having us during one of the most important months of the year, Women's History Month. For those of you who don't know Fairygodboss, it's the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss every day for career advice, jobs, community advice, and connections. Secondly, I just want to let everyone know that we are recording the session and we'll send it out via email once we're complete. Lastly, please don't hesitate to chime in. During the discussion, we'd love to hear from you. We hope you use the chat box on the right-hand side. Let us know what you're thinking. Interact with us, please. It'll be great. And with that, I'm excited to kick us all off on how to take the next steps in your career from the women leaders here at Howard Hughes. For those of you who don't know Howard Hughes, we design, build, manage, and own some of the most desirable neighborhoods and communities across the nation. We're fortunate to get to build communities that we get to live in for generations to come. I'm honored to be joined by these three women leaders from Howard Hughes, Bonnie Wiedemeyer, Ray Black, and Kimberly Banch from Howard Hughes Corporation. As we begin, I would like to take each of us a moment to introduce ourselves. As I said, I'm Hope. I started my professional career as a psychologist and then moved into the corporate arena where I've worked in several industries across my career. I'm a proud mom of 2 children, 1 amazing husband, and a great dog. With that, I'd love to take a moment for each of you guys to introduce yourself. We'd love to hear what's going on with you guys and tell us about your role today at Howard Hughes. So Bonnie, let's get started with you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Bonnie Wiedemeyer. I run condominium sales and strategy for Howard Hughes. Love my job. I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. My early career, I was a teacher, and I think a lot of those things apply, but have had a lot of fun here. I'm a proud mother of a 20-year-old, Olivia.
Wonderful. Okay, how about you, Ray?
Hi, I'm Ray Black. I'm with the Howard Hughes Corporation. I am a registered architect, VP in design management with the Houston region. I'm a native New Yorker. Been with Howard Hughes 5 years in December. Relocated to the Woodlands about a year ago.
Welcome to Texas. Woohoo!
Yeah, loving it. Love Texas. I really do. I worked with the architectural firm from the early 90s all the way through to 2008. And then that's when I made a shift to the private developer, developed high-rise residential buildings in New York. And now I'm developing all sorts of buildings in the Houston region, Texas. So I assembled the design teams, the architects, engineers, all the design consultants that make up the team, negotiate their fees and scopes, oversee the entire design process through all phases, all the way through to move-in.
All right. That sounds awesome. Thanks, Ray. What about you, Kimberly? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Kimberly Bannock. I am the Director of Marketing for the Howard Hughes Corporation in our newest region in Phoenix, where we are developing a community we just broke ground on last October called Terra Vallis. It's 37,000 acres, so it is the largest in landmass in the portfolio. And I've worked on several other master plan communities, anywhere from 850 acres on up to the 37,000 acres. And I'm a proud mom of teenage girls who keep me on my toes, as well as boy puppies who keep me even more on my toes.
All right, to get started, we're going to warm up a little bit. Let's talk about what was your first ever job. So with that, Ray, I'm going to kick it to you. Tell me about your first job ever.
I was in food service, working at a bagel store, and then later as a busgirl. And I realized very quickly that food service was not for me.
Awesome. What about you, Kimberly?
My first ever paid job was at a candy store. And I worked there for so long that I had incredible accuracy. If you told me how much you wanted to spend and what kind of candy, I could scoop you exactly $3 in gummy bears in almost every try.
All right, we need to do that as a side activity after this. What about you, Bonnie? Tell us about your first job.
I was 14. I had just gotten a work permit, and I was a summer tour guide for international students. I was showing them Hawaii, and I would get on the bus and go with them everywhere. Of course, I didn't speak their language, which is interesting now in retrospect, but it worked out. And it was a lot of fun.
A tour guide, that would be an awesome job.
Yeah.
So my first job ever, I was a lifeguard. It's a great thing. You got paid to get a tan. Perfect. Now that I'm older, always remember to wear sunscreen, but yeah, then it was perfect.
Did you ever have to save anybody?
Did. Yeah, and that's an interesting story. We'll save that for another time. All right, so let's talk about our next question. So all of us have been individual contributors, and then we've moved into management one time in our career. So when you guys did that, how did your priorities change? Talk about how your day-to-day was a bit different, and just tell us the stories of that transition. So with that, we're going to kick it over to you, Bonnie, first. I'm sorry, Kimberly, let's go to you first. Talk to me about that when you shifted over.
Sure. I think the biggest change for me was going from being, task-minded on a checklist where the satisfaction of checking something off the list was replaced by being able to look up and see the big picture of everything. And I think most importantly, being able to recognize talents in other people and help them find and fill roles that would suit them best.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of the job, right, to help us help our employees. What about you, Ray? Talk about yours.
I went from micro to macro. Went from being in the weeds to hovering above, which I found tough, to do more delegating and trusting other people's abilities. I looked at it more like a mentoring opportunity and to lead by example. And the priorities also shifted in a way by getting involved with community organizations, by volunteering, learning about the different community boards here in the Woodlands. So we develop NPCs here in Texas. We created this community. I also live here. So to be involved is a way of nurturing what we created.
Yeah. Yep. It's amazing how when you transition to that manager role, you get to cultivate and contribute to lots of different things and people as well.
Yes.
So it's a fun transition. It's a hard transition, but it's a great transition.
And it's I find it very rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. So Bonnie, speaking of creating that transition and moving to that next step, talk to me about your management style and kind of how did you develop it and did it change over the years?
My management style, I think, is born from the fact that as I've grown, I've done a lot of the jobs that kind of lead up to this. And so the team that I lead, I've worked in a lot of their roles before. But I guess if I was going to summarize it, I am very strategic and I'm also authentic. I'll roll up my sleeves. So by strategic, I mean that I try to define where we're going exactly and help everyone visualize exactly how I think we might want to get there. And then, and that's really kind of a higher level 30,000 feet thing. But then I think probably the key is that I go into everyone I'm leading, I kind of understand what their obstacles are, because I think having a boss who understands your job is really wonderful. And I can help remove obstacles for them ahead of time. And in that way, I think probably the key thing for me is trust. If my team trusts me, they're going to follow me into whatever vision I have. So I think I probably grew up in the business doing a little bit of everything, and that affected how I lead. Oh, you're muted.
You know what? We all need a sign that says you're muted because by gosh, that happens all the time. So Bonnie, as you think about that and you've moved through those times, has it gotten easier or do you think it's just a different type of struggle or is it much more fulfilling or a little bit of all?
I feel like, I dare say it's gotten easier because I think, practice makes permanent, right? And then also, I think that I have a great team that I can really count on. And so I think it's gotten easier in the sense that once you trust someone and you're kind of repeating the work together, maybe the first tower, I might do with the team is kind of not clunky, but it's kind of like, hey, is this going to work? There's the strategy. We're going to make it happen. Once you've kind of gone in and done that together, won, lost, whatever you've done, I think it's gotten easier just because you all trust each other and you kind of know each other's roles.
Yeah.
As far as growing, I would say probably the biggest thing for me is remembering to stay strategic, to stay with your vision on the end game and how you're going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Kimberly? I know that you've made the transition as well. And so how would you think about your management style and how it's changed? Yeah.
Sure, I would call my management style transformational and coaching. And I think that really was instilled in me as an intern in college. I was trained as a mediator. In a former life, I worked in that field, and really having to listen to people and help them solve problems. You have to have everyone's input and involvement. So that definitely influenced my style. I've also, like Bonnie, I've done all of the jobs that I would, oversee. So being able to have done everything that you're asking someone else to do, I think is important. Also important to me is empowerment. I think that when you have ownership in a task, you have pride in it. And so I think we all tend to do a little better when we have ownership.
I agree that ownership piece is important. So as we move from that management role and your style, is there someone in the organization or even outside the organization that sets you up for success? So Ray, why don't you take that one? Tell me about someone who's helped you set up for success.
Yeah, Jim Carmen, our Houston region president, has been so supportive and mentoring, making me aware of different organizations here that I may want to involve myself, that can better equip me with knowledge that is helpful in designing our buildings here in the Woodlands.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he has offered Rice real estate courses and just making himself available to chat about my goals and strategizing ways of how to achieve them. So, and I even have access to a life coach, who checks in every now and again. So it's, to have our president be that person is just, I'm so grateful.
And I think it's a part of being a boss like Jim is, and also just the balance with the life coach. It gives you a good two sides to look at. And Kimberly, what about you? Do you have a similar story about a boss in your life that's made you who you are?
I do. I think I was very fortunate to have what I would call a real life Fairygodboss, a woman named Tracy who recruited me in a previous role. And even after we were no longer at the same company, she stayed, very involved and thought of me for opportunities and encouraged me and coached me. And that was a big impact for me. I think having someone that believes in you can make a big difference. And it's definitely inspired me to try to do that for others as well.
And Bonnie, do you have someone, if you think about that, who's impacted your career? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes. I feel like I've been very fortunate to have kind of a mentor or a wonderful boss at kind of every section of my career. I would say the biggest thing for me was a mentor who empowered me, put me in charge of things and made me responsible for them, made me really think about the fact that there was visibility into my work. And it was just very confidence building. At the same time, it was pretty early in my career, but I think that it helped me realize that I love that accountability and that confidence. But again, I mean, my boss now, Doug, is he trusts me a lot. He's great to work with, and he understands my job. And so in that way, I have a bug here, sorry. In that way, I also have a great mentor right now. So I would say every part of my career, I've had kind of someone that, believed in me, that I could count on.
And I think that's important for all of us, that as you move into being a leadership position, that you have someone that you can count on, someone you can talk to. I had a boss earlier in my career. He said, you have 24 hours anytime something happens to come in and gripe about it. And then you got to put your boots on and jump out there and go fix it. So he would give me that 24 hours to think through and talk and say whatever I needed to say, and then we'd jump in and fix it. So just having that type of reflection and that tool to be able to do that was very instrumental for me early in my career. So let's think about the accomplishments and the things that we've done over our career. Is there something to you guys that stands out and says, you know, this is one of the things that I'm so proud of that I got to do? So with that, I'm going to drop it. How about Bonnie? What do you think? What was one of the things that you've been able to achieve that you're most proud of?
I mean, I guess, launch real estate or condo real estate when you launch, which is what I do really, is it's fun because when you get to, it's a very measurable success, right? If you succeed, you get there, there's a culmination of it. You can see if it worked. It feels kind of Super Bowl-like, and hopefully you win. And that's all fun, and the adrenaline is great. I would say, though, the thing I'm most proud of is the Park Ward Village, which is the project we launched during the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic, during when was it? But this project we launched entirely digitally, and we had the investment of the company to grow our digital platform. But I think it was still unprecedented, and what we were trying to do had never been done before. And I think maybe in the back of our mind, even though we were prepared and we thought we had anticipated everything, we were kind of like, is this going to work? And then when it did, it was beyond joyful as a team. I mean, it was the most fun and just the best victory ever, because I felt like, we gave our customers something to look forward to, and they actually liked Zooming with us and meeting with us, and it was something to dream about. And that's always fun when your business connects with a service. And then just as a team, I can't think of something that just made us all respect each other more. It was really fun. That was my favorite moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Especially to do it during such the crisis and feeling like you won. So about you, Ray, tell us about a time where you were an accomplishment that you were so proud of in your career.
So I have been a part of teams that have designed and developed and built so many buildings, and they're high rise, they're high profile, they're fashionable, they're glamorous, they're beautiful, and I'm proud of every one of them. All right, but then there were these two affordable housing towers in Hunters Point South in New York City, fronting right on the East River. And those buildings, they ended up being absolutely gorgeous. But what was so special about them was the tenants. They were affordable housing. And we did such a great job. We opened them up, the tenants moved in, we welcomed them with this big breakfast, and they show up and they couldn't thank us enough for providing this kind of housing for them. And these buildings were just so beautiful. They had beautiful gardens, vegetable gardens, barbecue, dining areas overlooking the water. And they were just over the top, so grateful, so appreciative. Meanwhile, you could open up a high-end condo and you can't do anything right, and these people are just like bending over backwards, just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And they were in tears saying thank you. And they brought me to tears saying, oh my gosh, so happy to be here. Those were my best accomplishments.
It sounds like being part of something that's bigger than just yourself and your organization was what was the cool part of that.
Yeah. And just seeing how it impacted their lives.
Touched them. That's great.
Yeah.
How about you, Kimberly? Tell us about a time that you were so proud of your accomplishments.
The time that comes to mind the most is when I worked for the arbitration and mediation company. One of the roles that I had was director of panels quality. So it was being involved in who was actually able to serve as arbitrators and mediators. So these were the lawyers and the business people that had the subject matter expertise to hear these disputes. And I got to travel to all of our offices across the country and meet with the boards and the panels. And it was very apparent to me, they all looked the same. It didn't matter which city I was sitting in, they were all male. There was zero diversity whatsoever on the panels. So I get to be heavily involved with changing that. If you have an employment dispute and you were discriminated against, the last thing that you want to do is have your judge and jury be with zero diversity also. So I think one of the challenges with that, this was in the 90s. So one of the qualification criteria is that you have at least 10 years senior level experience in that field. So we were looking at individuals that would have finished grad school in the 70s and the 80s. So if you look at the makeup of the graduation classes, in basically every industry, there wasn't as large of a pool to choose from. So we really had to, get to work and find talent that would be able to fill those holes. And I think also for me personally, it's not necessarily one accomplishment. It's more of something that I think I've achieved over time, and that's resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud to know that I can overcome things and that I will be fine, and I can dust my boots off and get back up. And I think that's something that I'm most proud of, I guess.
Yeah, there's things that happen in all of our careers that we're not really expecting. And it's that next step, right? It's that looking forward that kind of tells us who we are. So I think that's what you're talking about. That's that looking forward after something happens in your career. So.
Yeah, and just knowing you can get through it. You're, less afraid to take on new challenges and try new things, knowing that you've got the endurance and the capability to try and usually succeed.
Yeah. So one of our people that are watching us today put something in the chat, and it kind of relates to what you're saying. They said, I've been struggling to get into a management position. I'm always a top producer. I'm always a top trainer, and I'm trusted with a lot of the top topics, but it seems that I can never move up. Is it because I don't have enough leadership, or is there some type of leadership classes I should be taking? So which one of you want to take that question on? How important are the leadership classes as we move into up in the organization? I love when you all look at each other. There we go.
Perfect. I think it can't hurt. I would say go to look up some conferences, let your boss know you're going, and make sure that everyone's very busy, and make sure that you've set your intentions. Not like, hey, I want to be a manager tomorrow, but where am I today? How can you give me advice on how I could get there? This is what I'm looking for. What do I need to do in the gap? I'm signing up for this thing. Chances are your manager also is ambitious and also had that same path and will want to help.
And I think your point about going to leadership classes and being intentional and saying, I'm going to go take these things is important. And on the flip side, coming back around and saying, here's what I learned and here's how I'm going to apply it. I think all of us, when we give time to go to leadership classes, as bosses, we like to know, how did you guys learn and what did you apply it and how are we going to change? So that's a great piece of advice. I have another question out there that someone came to us. What advice do you guys have for women who are looking to change careers during this economic climate? So it kind of goes, Kimberly, being confident to take that jump. But what else is there? Is there something that we should be doing differently in 2023 to be visible during the job search? How do we know when to take that leap? So Kimberly, when you took that leap or you had that change, what made you confident?
I think it's more about just being willing to try new things, join new groups and networking. For my next level of career, it came as part of being in a master plan community and living in one and just getting more and more involved, volunteering a lot. And I discovered things that I truly enjoyed doing that I didn't even know I was capable of. So it's not always, picking the job or the leadership classes to get you there. I think it's just raising your hand and jumping in to try new things.
So Ray, one of the things that people don't know out there about your career is that you have went to school to be an architect, and you have done that throughout your whole career, right? So you kind of had a passion for it.
That's right. Yeah. The passion is really what led.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Was there a question? Wait.
Yeah. So the question is, you have this passion, you know where you're going. How do you handle people who don't go to school and do exactly with that passion? How do you help people find their passion?
Oh my gosh. That is so tough. Like I feel so badly for people that don't have that passion and that inner direction, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't know what to do. I honestly would not know. It's almost like look for the passion. You have to look within for that passion to help direct yourself. And just keep exploring new things.
I think what Kimberly said about the networking, going out, experiencing new things, networking helps you find your passion, right? And so if you don't have someone inside your company that helps support you to grow and change, how do you find someone on the outside? Does anybody have advice on how do you find a mentor not inside your company?
I want to meet Ray's life coach. That sounds like an incredible thing.
I think that's possible. Actually, he's in Arizona.
You're kidding.
I think
You've
that
gotta
you
share.
can go and, I'm thinking about times that I've been in that position on a couple of regional conferences that I went to where I met someone who might have a similar job to me or have a job that I would love to have, and get to know them socially, have them be an advocate. You're an advocate for them. That really helps.
Yeah.
Knowing someone that is kind of your parallel or above you in another position that you can get advice from.
So one of the questions we have is, how do you get out of the loop where you're stuck in that you don't have the opportunity because you don't have experience, but you can't get experience because you don't have the opportunity? How do you guys get out of that loop that happens?
I truly believe if you have a boss, if you have a mentor or a managing person that's above you, if you could just sit down and talk about your goals, what is it that you want to, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And how can you get there? Like this person who was asking about, how do I get to the next level, with these leadership courses. If your boss is approachable and you sit down and you talk about your goals, like if your boss is a really good boss, how do you strategize to get to those goals?
One of the things about Fairygodboss is it talks about women leaders. And, we here at HHC do a lot to support our women leaders. In fact, we have more women leaders than the benchmark inside of our industry. So we have more women leaders than other commercial real estate organizations. Is there something that you've done as a woman to develop yourself that you think is important that you'd like to share? Is there a class you've gone to? So I can jump in with that. One of the things that I did specifically is I went and I picked 3 women leaders that I've known throughout my career, and I made an intentional decision to reach out and contact them. Even though I hadn't talked to them in a year or 2 years, I actually went out and networked and found them on LinkedIn or found them through Facebook or anything else like that. And doing that made me feel that I was taking control of my career and also having other women help lift me up.
I'll just add, I think just volunteering, even, it's not about, starting at the highest level. I want to go into, management. It's being willing to just get started somewhere, even if it's working for free. My husband likes to tease me that there's something wrong with my arm because I'm always going I'll do it, and he's like, hey, we don't have time for that. But I put a lot on my plate. I like to try new things, and it's surprising how often it leads to somewhere else.
I would say visibility, make yourself visible is really important. And I think a couple of things that I've done in my career to do that, I'm thinking back early on, is I would introduce myself to people, even if it scared me. I would go to a conference and say, that's the keynote speaker. I'm going to go meet that person. Hi, I'm Bonnie. And then I think learning how to be a good public speaker. I think that there are, you can go on YouTube and learn how, you can hire a coach and learn how, but public speaking, even if you have like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, being able to get your point across and persuade, I think is a skill that will help you be more visible.
It's that elevator speech, right? All of us need to have the elevator speech about ourselves. Hi, I'm Hope, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's important that we practice that. We sound confident when we step into the room and say our name. So yeah, that's good advice, Bonnie. What about all of us work in a male-dominated environment? We've all worked there most of our careers. Talk about how that's affected you as a leader, and then how that's also helped as well. Bonnie, I know you and I've had this discussion once.
I think that, there's kind of two ways you can look at that. You can be like, okay, what am I going to do different? And then sometimes you can look at it and say, gosh, what are they doing right? What should I be doing? and there's a lot there, because there's a lot, confidence, faith in yourself, making sure you take care of yourself. So you can be selfish before you're generous, taking care of your health, taking care of a lot of things. I think there's a lot to be learned from those things. But I also think making sure that you don't fall into an administrative role. Everyone does admin, but making sure that you don't kind of, to be frank, great, I'll get the coffee and I'll take the notes. You're at the table because you're at the table, and you're everywhere decisions are being made. And I think other people will rise up to that. But those are my two advice. Observe and see what they're doing right, and make sure that you pull yourself up a chair at the table.
Always, if there's a chair at the table when I walk in the room at a meeting, you sit at the table, right? What about you, Ray? Talk to me, because you've also done your career in architecture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started out, I was an architect in the firm in the late 80s, early 90s, and there were not many women there at all. And, it truly made me grow. I had to be abrasive. I had to be hard. And it was what it was. It was being out on the job site, all men. I yelled a lot. I yelled a lot, because I'm little. I'm 4'11".
I was going to say, for those of you who haven't met Ray, she is literally 5 foot nothing. So.
And, so I had to make sure I was heard, and it actually gained me respect with all these big brutes that had to listen in my direction. And I became really good at being that way, abrasive and hard. And I had a very thick skin. And it was kind of, I don't know, it was unfortunate because I became that way because of the environment, or I chose to be that way. When I landed at Howard Hughes, I had to shed so many skins. And Howard Hughes, this environment is so mentoring and nurturing, and it's about supporting your peer, that it made me human again.
I'm excited to hear that. I hadn't heard that part of it. So I'm glad that Howard Hughes has helped you there.
Oh my God, tremendously. And I became respectful toward others again. And I can't express how grateful I am for that.
So as we move into the next phase of our conversations, let's talk about the most challenging career lesson we've had. I know that Kimberly kind of talked about that a bit. How did you deal with the challenging career lesson, and then what did you do to overcome?
I'd say the biggest challenge in my career was kind of having a major transition right in the middle of it where I had children. So I was already at a vice president level when it was the right time in my life to have children. And I really had to learn to balance both roles equally. I think a challenge for most of us as career mothers is, you're feeling guilty when you're at home that you're not working, and you're feeling guilty when you're at work that you're not taking care of something at home. So being able to balance that and know that you're good enough and you're doing just fine in both roles and you can do it all. For me, it was a big career shift. The career that I had before involved a tremendous amount of travel, and that wasn't something that I was able to do. I needed to be a little closer to home. So I literally started a new career in my own hometown where I could be very close to home.
Someone on our chat talked about the imposter syndrome, and they're asking me, do we ever feel like we have the imposter syndrome? And I don't know about you guys, but there are times when you get up and you have a big meeting and you're like, okay, am I really the one doing all this? And it still happens. So do you guys still have that even as you've many years in your career?
I think you always will. It's a voice inside of you that, you have to kind of quiet. It says you're not good enough. And that voice, it can be quieted. I think it's also talking to a lot of women, and everyone is kind of feeling the same way. And that makes it better. Somehow you're definitely not alone in those feelings. And I'm sure men have them too. Maybe they don't talk about them as much as we do, but it's just being part of, honoring yourself. You do have voices that you have to listen to, but you have to know when to quiet.
And that's part of what Fairygodboss does a nice job of. It's connecting the women so we can build each other up and talk about those things. So, is there something that you guys do in your spare time that makes you have passion and thrive and aid you in your professional life? So talk to me about that special something you do that gives you strength. What about you, Ray? What's the one thing outside of work that you do?
Well, me and my husband, we love live music, and we country dance. We love two-stepping.
All right, so when you guys find Ray here in Houston, we can go do line dancing together, right? Do some two-stepping. Okay, what about you, Bonnie? What's your thing outside of work?
This might surprise you because I don't seem that mellow, but I love yoga. I do yoga maybe 2 or 3 times a week, hard yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and I have for about 20 years. I love it because you actually cannot think about anything else during it. It's very hard physically too. It makes you strong. And I think the other thing is, I love to travel. Not a lot. I don't do it a lot, but about once a year we go on a family trip for a couple of weeks that really takes you out of your world. And I love planning it. I love doing it. I love the memories, but it really makes me feel, I think, more pointed when I get back, that I'm truly refreshed. And I think both things refresh me.
So there's someone, I just have to tell you guys, there's someone on the chat that they bake cookies and they decorate their cookies, which just, the art of decorating a cookie. I get it. It's the focus. Yeah. So about you, Kimberly, what do you do? Tell us what you do in your...
Well, lately it's been adopting puppies. I think that fits nicely into the imposter syndrome, or any of those self-doubts. I mean, dogs really give us unconditional love. So if you ever feel like you're not good enough, get some puppies and they'll assure you that you're doing just fine.
Nothing like puppy slobber to make you feel good, right? Okay, so what advice would you give your younger self? I told you one of my pieces of advice is always wear sunscreen. And the other piece of advice is, have faith in yourself. You guys can do it. So that's my two pieces of advice. What about you, Ray? What's a piece of advice that you would give the audience?
Was that to me?
Yep.
I really love that sunscreen thing.
What about
I
you, Bonnie?
do, because, I'm of that age. I'm getting those brown spots. And
What about you, Bonnie? What's a piece of advice that you give your younger self?
Right before I went to college, I remember thinking, I'm going to go into real estate. And then I was like, oh no, I'm going to college, and I studied history and everything, but I always loved business. I always did. And I use history every day, and that's fantastic. I wouldn't change it, but I think I would have gone with my instinct about what I really loved earlier. I knew it. I knew I wanted to be a business person, and I would have gone for it earlier.
Okay. What about you, Kimberly?
It's tough advice to take, but I would say try not to overthink everything. Sometimes it doesn't really matter what path you choose. You're not going to be able to control everything anyway. So just buckle up and enjoy the ride.
I love that. Let's enjoy the ride. All right. We have a couple questions from the audience that I think we need to jump into for just a moment. Somebody said, what ages were your children? So this is for Kimberly and Bonnie. What ages were your children when you jumped into leadership? So Kimberly, you said that you were just having children when you became in leadership. Is that right?
That's right. I'd say I took a big step back from leadership and kind of started over down a new path. So my kids have literally grown up with me in that process. So.
What about you, Bonnie?
Olivia was 3. And I remember reading an article from a working mom, like a celebrity working mom at the time. And they said, how do you do it? And she said, with great precision. It was a great answer, because it's like, if one thing didn't work, like the nap didn't happen or my appointment didn't end on time, it was a lot. So I actually think that it strengthened me as a leader, because it really raised my ability to multitask and move from thing to thing faster.
Yeah. I had my daughter and I was finishing up my PhD, and I had to finish the actual dissertation. I already had a career. I'd moved into management, and my dissertation chair calls and says, Hope, your classes are going to start falling off if you don't finish this. And I thought to myself, if I don't get this done, I can never look my daughter in the eye and say, you've got to finish what you start. And so that was kind of the kick for me to get that done. And that's how I knew that children had changed my life. So it was a great time to do that and to be the leader. Okay, so someone else asked, talk about a time when you were surprised at how your career went. Was there something that you didn't plan, or was everything planned in your career?
I could take that all day long.
Yep.
I've always been really ambitious. Shocker. And I've always asked for things and wanted things. But when I look back on the 4 big moves in my life, the 4 big career moves, all 4 of them were offered to me without them being my idea. And that's interesting, right? Because it isn't like, oh my gosh, who's that lady? Let's go ask her. It was more like I was kind of already doing the work. I was already offering value. I was offering value to somebody else who thought, you know what? I want to do less. I want to hire her to do that. And so I think that, do what you love and make yourself visible, and it worked out. But there have been 4 surprises in my life that have been wonderful.
What about you, Kimberly?
I've been a part of a number of organizational changes, companies that were acquired. And I think just, sticking with it and holding your head up and not being, terrified that this is the end of the world. It's just, okay, here's the new path, and these are the roads available to me, and show up.
Ray, what about you?
Well, it's very similar to Bonnie. a lot of my moves that got me to where I am today, they all just presented themselves to me, and I kind of just went along with them. And it was never ever anything that I could have planned. They all just happened.
Yeah. There's a saying I have that luck favors the prepared. And sometimes you get to that point, you're prepared, and then something happens and you can jump. So it's always be prepared. There's a specific question that came through about, I have found the HHC environment to be supportive and appreciative of mature employees, but many other employers are not like that.
Oh,
Several
so
intelligent, mature friends of mine feel that they're stuck at their jobs because they're too old to look for something better. Can you offer a possible strategy for looking for something better? As an HR professional, I'll jump right out there. The way to look for something better is to start today and write down what that is. What's your vision of what looks better? Even if it's writing down what you don't like, let's figure out what you do like, and let's go find that out there in the environment. Connect with somebody who does that, and that will be your first step.
Be open-minded.
What'd you say, Kimberly?
Be open-minded.
Yep.
And I think just putting yourself out there, just get out there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel stuck, because you're never stuck. You're stucking yourself.
I think not that it's like a dream you can't have, but I like the sentence, dreaming is a form of planning.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you dream something, sometimes you have something you want, right? And you almost like won't listen to it because you're like, oh, that's too big. So I think dreaming, writing down what you want, dreaming what you want, your stretch, and then of course follow hopes, advice, and connect with somebody. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add, don't be afraid to start over and not start at the same level. Sometimes you have to start at a lower level just to get your foot in the door, but your experience comes with you, that wisdom. So you'll travel, climb the ladder higher, having had that experience even in another field under your belt.
I love that, because sometimes you got to take a step down before you can go even further. So I think that's important. Okay, we're going to move to the lightning round, ladies. So here's the lightning round. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's your quote? What's the mantra that you say, the quote that inspires you, the quote that makes you feel good? What is it? One quote. Ray, what's your quote?
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. By Reinhold Niebuhr.
You go, sister. I agree. What about you, Bonnie? What's your quote?
I think it has to do with betting on yourself, go for it. And sometimes being a detailed person, you ask a lot of questions and then might miss something. So mine is, I have a lot of them. I really like quotes, but this one is today. If a rocket ship shows up, don't ask what seat. Get on.
Yeah, that is a good one. What about you, Kimberly?
This one comes from my late mother. She used to say that circumstances can either bitter you or better you. And I keep that in my heart because it reminds me to accept the stumbles and keep growing.
So mine has to do with Eleanor Roosevelt. And she once said, do something every day that makes you feel uncomfortable, because that's where you grow. And so every day I try to think of the one thing that I'm like, oh. But you jump out there and you do it, you get better at it. So ladies, it's been great. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you for many more years. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.